Congratulations! You own Buckingham Palace, 775 rooms, a huge private London garden, over 1 million artworks. Read the paperwork. You don't own the business behind it, neither does the king. Last year, the property empire named for him made over £1.1 billion. His allowance is a cut of that for royal duties, not his pocket. Where's his pay and why did he ask to have it? The tour, a 1760 deal still setting the budget, a ticket business born from another castle's fire. Before you spend a cent, see what the people who run this place are doing. Now the building inspector's report lands first, and it's not pretty. The building comes first because the money going out comes before the money coming in. And remember, this whole chaotic situation is yours now. If you don't find the real money machine quickly, the building will use up all your money before your first garden party. The palace may look like a museum, but underneath the shiny gold covering, the parts that hold it up are old. Because of the wiring and water pipes, the palace has been officially marked as a fire and flood risk. The fix is a full replacement of the wiring and water pipes. It costs £369 million and takes 10 years. Britain's lawmakers voted on it back in 2017, 464 to 56. When a government agrees that strongly on one repair bill, they're keeping the place from burning down or flooding. Right now, roughly 1/3 of the king's entire annual allowance goes into this job. Behind the grand formal rooms where banquets happen, workers in bright safety vests are pulling out decades-old wiring and old wall material. A 10-year repair job is underway. Tourists photograph the front door and think the place looks perfect. Some pay to tour the grand formal rooms. The people who run the palace say it clearly. The job will earn enough money to cover its cost. They project £136 million in extra visitor income and savings between 2026 and 2066. And the percentage that funds the king's allowance had been raised from 15% to 25% specifically to pay for this work. That higher rate has a built-in end date. The year is 2027. That's when it's supposed to drop back down. But where does that budget actually come from? To answer that, the story goes back to 1760. In 1760, a 22-year-old king named George III takes the throne. The king before him had built up debts running the country, so George makes a deal. He agrees to hand over the family's enormous land empire, the Crown Estate, to Britain's Parliament for as long as he is king. In exchange, he gets a fixed annual payment. That deal still decides how much the king can spend today. The Crown Estate is not his, by the way. It goes back to 1066 when William the Conqueror literally owned all of England. Today it belongs to the Crown as an institution, a legal idea, not the person. A board of managers runs it, and every pound of profit goes straight to the treasury, the government's money pot. But George kept one thing, a separate private estate called the Duchy of Lancaster. That's the only property income that still goes directly to the monarch's own personal account, not through the formula. The percentage of Crown Estate profits that becomes the king's allowance, remember that. It becomes important later. Now, fast forward to 2011. The old payment system gets rewritten. The new rule is called the sovereign grant. That's just a fancy name for the king's annual allowance. Here's how it works. The king's household gets a percentage of what the Crown Estate earned 2 years earlier. At first, it was 15%. That 2-year delay means the king's pay is always based on an old number. His 2024 allowance is based on what the estate earned in 2022. A treasury worker takes a percentage set years ago. Then they multiply it by a profit number that is already 2 years old. That multiplication is the entire legal basis for how much the king can spend. The rate was later cut to 12%. Want proof the formula works exactly as written? 12% of the Crown Estate's £1.101 billion profit last year is £132.12 million, and the allowance published for the next year is £132.1 million. The numbers match, and that money funds official duties across the whole working monarchy. Travel, staff, keeping the palace open. For most of its history, the Crown Estate made its money from farms, buildings, and shops. That was solid, boring money. The Crown Estate also owns the seabed and the bottom of the sea were around Britain. Then something changed. The seabed started paying. The Crown Estate owns the rights to the seabed around England and Wales. For most of history, nobody wanted it. Then wind power arrived. In January 2023, the Crown Estate ran an auction for the right to build wind farms out at sea. Energy companies bid for the chance to build there someday. They pay an option fee, a fee just for holding that right before a single wind machine is even built. This auction had no price cap, so the bids went out of control. Crown Estate profit went from £442.6 million the year before to over £1.1 billion the next year. That's a jump of more than 3 times in 1 year. Those option fees are running at roughly £900 million a year. Even with record profit, the Crown Estate's total wealth actually shrank. It fell from £15.8 billion to £13.5 billion. Why? Because the shops and offices it owns were losing value at the same time. Record profit and shrinking wealth are two truths at once. And one more thing, to be clear, Scotland runs its own separate auction for seabed rights. That one raised almost £700 million. But that money goes to the Scottish government, not to the king's household. They're two different pots in two different countries. So the allowance formula is tied to the Crown Estate's profit, and that profit just tripled. The formula is very direct. Under the old 25% rate, a tripled profit would have handed the king the biggest pay rise in modern royal history. And that was the problem. The king didn't create the wind, the seabed did. £1 billion surprise profit landing in his household would have looked like the monarchy making money from the country's energy change. So in July 2023, less than a year after becoming king, Charles, the king you've been hearing about, asked for his own percentage to be cut, from 25% down to 12%. He did it publicly before pressure could build and said the wind profits should go to the wider public good, not extra funding for the monarchy. What did that actually cost him? A separate cap limits how much the grant can rise in 1 year. The monarchy got £24 million less in the next year than it would have at the old rate. Across the 2 years after that, the total comes to more than £130 million less. Every one of those pounds was legally his under the formula. He gave them back before the story turned into a scandal. This is the strangest part of the whole machine. In this business, looking like you don't want the money is worth more than the money itself. Okay, so the king's allowance comes from a formula tied to a seabed auction, and he had to cut it. But you, as the new owner, what exactly do you own here? Even the art on the walls doesn't belong to anyone the way you'd think. You now own 775 rooms, 188 staff bedrooms, 92 offices, 78 bathrooms, 52 main bedrooms, and 19 grand rooms used for ceremonies. The garden covers 39 acres. 1 acre is about the size of a football pitch, making it the largest private garden in London. More than 700 people work there, and roughly 50,000 invited guests pass through every year for garden parties, receptions, and state banquets. The Royal Art Collection holds more than 1 million objects: paintings, drawings, prints, photographs, and more. The collection has 2 types of ownership. Some pieces belong to the monarch personally. Other pieces are held in trust and right of the crown, which means they're attached to the job, not the person. The strangest rule is this: anything acquired before Queen Victoria died in 1901 automatically passes to the next monarch as a family treasure. That rule has never actually been tested in a court, so you can stand in one of the palace art rooms and see 2 paintings hanging side by side that look nearly identical. One is owned personally by the king, the other is merely held for the job. There is no visible difference between them. So the building is a fire risk, the allowance got cut, and the art is an ownership puzzle. But there's one more piece of the machine, the part that behaves most like a normal business, and it started with a fire. Here's the part the tour guide never mentions. In 1992, a spotlight pressed against a curtain at Windsor Castle, a different palace up the road, started a fire. The damage came to £36.5 million. The fix chosen in 1993 changed everything. The government announced that 70% of the repair cost would come from charging the public to get in. That included a brand new £8 ticket just to see Buckingham Palace. The Queen, the King's mother, put in £2 million of her own money. She also agreed to start paying income tax from 1993. She was the first British monarch to do that by choice since the 1930s. That fire created today's ticket business, a charity set up in 1993 with about 500 staff, no government funding, and no income except entrance fees and shop sales. It's the one part of this machine that behaves like a normal business, including normal risks. During COVID, it lost £64 million in a single year, cut a large part of its staff, and had no one to rescue it. The doors were shut. Today, the numbers are back. Almost 700,000 people visited the palace last year. Another 175,000 went to a public gallery at the palace that shows the art. The same logic of the family's own property pays for its own repair now sits behind the £369 million repair job, which projects more visitor income. Every time this family's real estate catches fire, literally in 1992, or financially with that toxic surprise profit in 2023, the fix is the same: sell more tickets and let the building's own fame pay for the building. The royal money story breaks into pieces. You probably picture one pot. In reality, there are at least 4. Only one of them is the one Britain's parliament votes on. Pot 1 is the Crown Estate. You know this one now. It gives 100% of its profit to the Treasury, and Parliament pays a percentage back as the King's allowance. That's the visible machine. Pot 2 is the Duchy of Lancaster. This is the one thing George III kept back in 1760. It's a separate estate that goes back to the 1300s, covering about 45,000 acres across England and Wales. Its only job is to feed the King's personal account, outside the allowance entirely. Last year, it handed him £25.2 million. Pot 3 is the Duchy of Cornwall. Created in the 1300s too, within 14 years of the other one. This one belongs to Prince William, the King's son and heir, who is the Duke of Cornwall. It covers about 135,000 acres, half of it on wild open land called Dartmoor. That's a huge area. William's first full year brought him £23.6 million. He pays a personal income tax bill of £5 to £7 million every year. That's a lot of land and money for one person. Pot 4 is whatever personal wealth sits outside all of that. That number stays hidden. The Duke of Cornwall cannot sell duchy land. He can, however, sell the right to some of its future income. He only receives the income it generates, the rent and sales income, never the land itself. The duchy is also treated as not having to pay tax. Government departments are expected to ask the prince for agreement before passing any law that touches duchy interests. One member of parliament put it like this: the duchy maintains it as merely a private estate. Most people will be very surprised to learn that it appears to have effective powers of veto over the government. Clearly, the duchy can block laws it doesn't like. William has announced one change. He plans to sell 20% of the duchy by 2040 and put about £500 million into housing and environmental projects. It's the same family and the same medieval setup with slow reform. And those two medieval estates still quietly pay two different living royals. That money is completely outside the official £76.1 million figure, the government's published annual cost of the monarchy, which most people think is what the monarchy costs. Okay, so you've got 4 pots of money, a fire risk, a ticket business, and an art collection nobody quite owns. That sounds like you understand it, until you remember one thing. Security here costs money, but it didn't keep the place safe. The most famous security failure in the palace's history proves how exposed you really are. In 1982, a man climbed a pipe on the outside wall of Buckingham Palace and slipped inside. He walked around the building for half an hour, ate some cheese and crackers, sat on a throne, drank half a bottle of wine, and walked out without anyone stopping him. A month later, the same man climbed in again. This time he reached the Queen's bedroom while she was inside. 3 separate alarms had been ignored because people thought they were broken. The armed guard on duty had left for the day before his replacement arrived. The Queen phoned the front desk for help, and no one came. Why was this so easy? Because back in 1982, stepping onto palace grounds without permission was not a crime. It was treated like a minor civil matter, like walking across someone's lawn. It took 23 years for that to change. Not until 2005 did the palace become a protected site where stepping inside without permission is actually criminal. Now, there's a bigger fight about the public's right to know here. A campaign group called Republic, which argues for removing the monarchy, put the true total cost at least £345 million, several times the official £76.1 million figure published around then. Their argument: security, lost duchy income, and local council costs don't show up in the official number. That £345 million is a campaign group's estimate, not an independently checked number. But it points at the real issue. The public has never been able to see the full bill. So that's your palace. The tickets barely cover the basic running costs. The real money sits in a seabed auction you'll never see. The allowance formula pays you based on a profit number that's already 2 years old, and you had to cut it in half just to survive the public. 2 medieval estates keep paying 2 family members outside everything you control. And the one thing that's genuinely, without question, yours is the repair bill. £369 million? And a building officially marked as a fire risk. The palace runs on the formula, and now you know exactly where the money really is. Enjoy the garden. Bring a hard hat for the wiring.